Hi guys, welcome to this session about introduction to an app development. This session is going to cover all the basics that you would need about app dev. It's going to cover basics of Java. It's going to give you a little bit of animation tutorials, and even if you're completely new to app development as a whole, this course is not going to be, or this session is not going to be too intimidating for you. I have chosen subjects which are completely basic, and I will go through all the basics so that you will be able to understand most of the animations and most of the basic Java functions that I'm going to be teaching you guys in this particular session. The session is obviously brought to you by SIAM VIT, which is one of the best clubs available in VIT, and I am Sai Salim, who I'm going to be your host for this particular session. So without any further ado, let us try and dive into this particular session. So the most fundamental initial question that anybody who's starting off with application development would have is why or what is application development, right? So application development in its whole is just the name of a profession that employs people who design applications. So that's a very basic definition. And where do you see applications? So if you're completely new to this field, the mobile phones that you use daily or the PCs that you use daily on your day-to-day life, every single thing has a lot of applications. And to be honest, at this point of time, without an application, you can't really move forward. I mean, applications are pretty much the future. So if you ask me why you want to dive into application development, that is another reason that we're going to touch upon during this session, is because application development is definitely one of the most important things coming into the future as well. If you see all the most popular things, the most biggest companies, they have all made it big using application development. So knowing how to develop your own app is not just going to be fulfilling for yourself, it is also going to be a big boost for your future. So now let's talk about how application development as a whole, you have a lot of options in application development itself. You have the option to either do Android application development, which is also known as Android native application development, or you can do iOS application development, or you can do desktop application development. So there is a plenty of options for you. You have even web application development. So there is just a lot of options that you have as a person who's wanting to start off with application development, and you can literally start off with any of those options, and there are even more options. Obviously, I'm not mentioning all of them, but the one that we're going to be doing in this session is going to be Android application development. Right now, you could ask me, why would we want to do Android application development out of all the other application developments? Well, I got the answer for you that in the other slides. So if you just look at this particular graph, you can see that the amount of users for Android is incredibly huge compared to the amount of users, let's say, for the next most popular operating system, iOS, or any other operating system. Always you can pretty much figure out that Android developers are in a huge amount, or you can just say Android users are in a huge amount, which basically indicates that there is a huge market. I'm going to repeat this throughout the session, that Android has a huge market, and it has probably the biggest market when it comes to operating systems, and it's just so big. And because of this, the variety of users and you get, or the variety of customers that you'll be able to get as an Android application developer, is so huge. And you will not only be able to make one app for a huge audience compared to any other operating system, you will also be able to give it for free, and then you will be able to make money through any other kind of revenue, like AdSense or whatever. But the main important thing that I would think as an Android developer, why I have, let's say, an edge over any other developer, is because I have the biggest market in my hand. Android development has the biggest market because of the number of users for Android. Now, iOS would be the most competitive one for us, but still, Android is definitely the biggest market. So if I just look on a worldwide scale, you can see that Android is being used most throughout the world. So if you obviously check America, and you can see that in USA, iOS is being more used, and that is obvious from the reality as well. Most of the iOS devices are sold in, let's say, America, USA, and also in Australia. But pretty much everywhere else, India, Asia, pretty much everywhere else over here, you can see that Android is the most preferred operating system. And this is exactly the point I was trying to make, that Android is such a large scale, it is incredibly huge, and it is definitely, that's probably one of the main reasons that I would suggest to go for Android application development over any other development. And it's a simple fact that the market is incredibly huge. So if you just create one particular app in Android, you will be reaching more than 1 billion users, and that is a huge market to tame, right? And the potential that you get in Android development is much huger compared to any other development firsthand, right? So this is one of the reasons that I would suggest you to go for Android app development compared to any other app development. Now, why is Android so popular? So the main reason that Android is so popular is because it's free, right? I'm not saying that everything about Android is free, but pretty much almost everything that is available on Android is free. You can see that most of the games, most of the music, everything is almost free. There are a lot of paid stuff as well, but almost everything is free, right? And this allows Google to join hands with the leading hardware manufacturers and bring out a really smart smartphone. So this basically indicates that Google is not only able to produce something at a cheap price, but it's also able to produce something at a very good price. Now, why am I saying Google? Is because Google is the company which has produced Android, but any company that is manufacturing an Android product is generally easily able to do it, is because of the hardware prices are too expensive, making the cost of the particular device again low, and it's also going to bring in quality to that particular phone. So because of this, the Android just became so much more popular. Why? Because of the price. So the price of the manufacturer is obviously going down for hardware, because you're able to afford cheaper sets of hardware, but also at a better efficiency, which will bring a better smartphone at the end of the day at a cheaper price. And what does that do? It will give you more customers. So that's why you can see Android became more popular, right? And another point just defining this is Android devices span all price ranges. I do not think that there is any other operating system device that has phones below 10,000 rupees, or even at, let's say, 4,000 or 6,000 rupees. You can get yourself an entire Android device with, let's say, even the minimum specifications of, let's say, 2 GB RAM or 3 GB RAM or whatever. You can get even the most minimum specifications for an Android device, but you can never find a iPhone which is less than 10,000 rupees, unless it's, let's say, an iPhone 2G or a 3G. But comparing that to any Android device, it's obviously much better compared to an iPhone 2G or 3G or whatever, right? So 100% is Android devices obviously have a much larger price range, in sense that you will get phones ranging from pretty much every price. If you are a premium Android user, you'll get it in the higher ranges. If you are not too much of a premium Android user, you don't use Android that much, you just want it for basic functionalities, you will get it at a cheap range as well, right? So that makes Android again very popular because of the span of all those price ranges. The next thing we're going to talk about is Android obviously also has a wider compatibility for devices. So you do not see any other operating system that is able to sync up or able to be compatible with so many devices other than Android. So Android has that ability of being able to be compatible with plenty of devices. It's pretty much compatible with every Bluetooth device, every Wi-Fi. It's has a huge compatibility area. And Android's artificial intelligence features probably weren't on par for the past 5 to 6 years, but as of right now, they have completely caught up. And you can see Google Assistant and all of those AI softwares being used probably more than other operating systems AIs, or at least equal to them, because it has just gained a lot more popularity, especially with the release of the Google Home and all those home automation AIs, it has just made Android software a lot more popular compared to already it was a lot more popular, but it's just made it even more popular with the release of the Android AIs and the Google Assistants is what I'm just talking about the Google Assistants with Android AI, right? So this gave Android a huge boost in terms of the AI features as well. So again, increasing the popularity of Android, increasing the market for you as an Android application developer. And like I've already said just before, Android devices again have a great variety. You have a great variety of devices. You have 2 GB devices, 2 GB RAM devices, 4 GB RAM devices, 6 GB, 8 GB, and right now I think you even get 12 GB RAM devices, and you get different variants of storage: 16 GB SSDs, sorry, 16 GB external cards, 32 GB, 256. You get so many internal storages. You just get a wide variety of Android devices available to you as an option. So that makes it that much more better for the market. You just get a way bigger and a way wider market as an Android developer, and that's just going to make it that much more of a better option for you to be an Android developer, right? So basically till now all I was just talking about is just why you would want to choose Android application development over all the other application developments, because you should be defining why I would choose this over that. And the main reason that you would want to choose Android application development is just because of the larger audience, the larger market that is available for you if you are an Android application developer. And all the slides before this was just trying to prove that point. Now let's say you've decided, okay, I want to be an Android application developer. So how do I get started, right? So in order for you to start making your own app, the most basic thing you need to know is you need to have that particular passion, because even with any type of technical knowledge, if you don't have the passion to go through with it, if you don't have the drive let's say I myself get stuck in so many places. It might be just because of a small error, it might be just because of something small that I missed out. But if you don't have the patience to, let's say, take a break and come back to it later on, you don't have that passion to come back to it later on, it's just going to be a hell of a task for you to get through. It's just going to be way too difficult for you probably, and it's not going to work out. So you need to have the proper drive, you need to have the proper passion to be able to do any kind of technical field, including app dev as well. If you get stuck in a problem, your head can get pretty hot, and what I generally do is I just take some time off and I probably come to that app the next day, and it generally always works. I'm always able to solve it the next day. So that's one thing that I make sure that I do, is I just take some time off and come back to it. You have to make sure that you come back to it. So if you don't have that particular passion, try and develop it if you want to get into this field. Otherwise it's going to be very difficult. So that's the most basic thing that you need to get. The next thing, technical knowledge that you would need to know any of the languages that are supported by these app building platforms. So there are a ton of languages that are available that you can learn in order to create your own app, but I'm just going to go through the basics over here, and also I'm going to give you a slight small description of each particular language. I will tell you which is probably the best, and obviously in today's session we're going to do all the coding in Java. Java is the most popular language for Android app dev, and this is because it's just been the ruler for the longest time in terms of the languages used for app dev. Java has a lot of support, and we'll talk about that later on. But as you can see in the screen, Kotlin, which is a programming language, Java, JavaScript, Dart, which is again a programming language developed by Google, and Swift, which is used for iOS. All these programming languages can be used to build your own Android app, right? I'm just talking about an Android app, and Swift can only be used for iOS development, right? So let's get to the next slide. Let's talk about Java, which I've taken this as the first slide because this is the absolute most popular and the most used language for app dev. So Java is the most popular language for Android app development, and it was the official language for app dev for the longest time. App dev was always ruled by Java for the longest time, and it still is, to be honest, in a kind of a way, because I guess like 90% of the users of app dev, 90% of the developers are using Java even to date. And the main reason for this is because it's got a huge community and support, which is the fourth point in the slide. Java is so old that the amount of users for it are so high. And if you have any problem, if you get stuck in any particular point of time, you can always go online and you will be able to find out a solution for it. I'm not sure it's completely right for the other languages, let's say like for Kotlin or Dart, because these languages are slightly even, newer compared to, let's say, Kotlin. You might be able to find a bit more, but Dart, it's quite hard to find a solution online because it's pretty new. But coming to Java, it's almost 99% guaranteed that you will find something or another related to it, especially in websites like Stack Overflow. Right? So you will always be kind of able to find out something or another related to your question or your error, and you will be able to solve it. And that's one of the reasons why most people use Java, is just because of the huge community and the huge amount of support that you get for Java. You always have a solution available online. Talking about Java itself, obviously it's a programming language, and another thing that makes it unique is it's obviously open source and it's also completely free to use. And you don't need, there's no premium subscription, there's nothing like that. It's completely free to use, and it's also very easy to learn, especially if you have any other coding knowledge. Let's say you've already learned C++ in your 12th grade, or if you've already learned C++ in your first year, learning Java is going to be absolutely easy for you, because C++ and Java are so similar. There's just a little bit of syntax differences, but it's going to be very easy for you to pick up on. It'll just take you probably a day or two to learn Java if you already know C++. But if you don't have any prior knowledge as well, in that case also Java is super easy to learn. It is not at all difficult to learn. So Java is one of the best options that you have when it comes to learning a program language for doing app dev, right? And you can use Java not just for app dev, you can use it for a lot of other developments as well, which is why I would suggest Java is a really good option for you to take up. I wouldn't suggest it's the best option, but Java is a really good option. And if you are starting off with app dev like we are today in this session, Java is where you should start off with, right? I wouldn't suggest you to go for any other language except Java if you're starting off with Android app dev basics, because Java is the absolute basic fundamentals that it'll get your fundamental set if you do coding in Java, right? I wouldn't suggest you, let's say, you jump right into Dart. You could, but I wouldn't suggest you go right into Dart without any prior coding knowledge. If you have some prior coding knowledge, you might be able to pull off Dart, but or pull off Kotlin as well. Kotlin is a little bit more easier, but I would suggest go for Java first, then go for Kotlin, and then you can think about the other languages. We'll get to that. But yes, Java can be used for a variety of app developments, not just Android app dev, right? So that again makes Java a super efficient and a very popular option. And yes, when it comes to your coding as well, right? So if you're planning to do competitive coding, Java will obviously be a very good option there. So generally you have two main options. You have a lot of options, but you have two main options when it comes to competitive coding. You either have coding in C++ or Java, right? So if you choose C++, that's absolutely fine. If you choose Java, that's also absolutely fine. But if you are planning to use Java, which I would suggest for competitive coding, you can do a little bit of practice in your app dev as well. So if you are doing app development along with your competitive programming, and you're using Java or competitive programming, it's not going to be a huge benefit if you're going to use Java in app dev. It's not going to benefit you in a huge amount in your competitive sessions, but it will still give you a practice on the syntaxes of Java. It will keep you thorough, it will keep you refreshed on the syntaxes of Java. So if you are planning to use Java for your competitive programming, it's going to really help you out when you're trying to do it for your app dev as well, right? So Java overall is a superbly and probably my second best option that you have for Android app dev. Let's talk about the next option that we have is Kotlin, and I personally use Kotlin just because of its easiness to use. So let's talk about Kotlin a bit. As of now, Kotlin is the official language which is used for Android app dev. Kotlin, for the longest time, Java was the official language. So people might be confused a little bit. I heard that Java was the official language. Yes, it was the official language for the longest time. But right now, Kotlin has taken over it, and Google itself has said that Kotlin is the official language for Android app development, on Android Studio at least, right? So the thing that makes Kotlin much better compared to, let's say, Java, or just better than Java, is the amount of code that it uses is much less compared to Java. Where Java you might require to write a long piece of code with a plenty of lines. Kotlin obviously reduces the amount of code, much less amount of lines, and a smaller code, which is obviously going to increase not just the size of your app, it will also make it much more efficient for running, and just your entire process will be better if you have a smaller amount of code. That's the fundamental rule of coding. Try and get as much as small amount of codes for the same process. So Kotlin helps you to do that, and there is an error which is called as a null point exception. So the two pictures that I've applied here is just indicating that. So this image right here is for Kotlin and this image right here is for Java, right? So do not get confused with both. This is how you code in Java. I will get into detail about how you can define this, how this happens, and this is how Kotlin looks, right? So this basically means this particular first line, this particular first line just means that I have declared a variable which is a string type, right? And if I'm just saying that that variable is a null value, it's going to give me an error, right? So Kotlin helps you to protect yourself from this particular error, which I have depicted the same error in this form in Java as well. You can see that I have defined a object which is named as ref, and I've put it to null, right? So this will basically show me a null point exception if I'm trying to put it to a string, because it's a null value, can't print it or you can't convert it to a string. So when it comes to a Kotlin point of view, you can define it with this question mark equal to operator, and it allows you to basically define your variable as a nullable type, which you won't be able to do in Java, because it will not just give you an error, it will give you a null point exception as well. So you can avoid that in Kotlin by defining it in this form, and you use it a lot of times. You also sometimes use double exclamation, but that pretty much means the same thing. You're trying to define it as a nullable type. So let's say there are plenty of times where you don't want to define a variable any value, you just want to give it a null value, and you might give it a value later on during the coding process, which you will see when you're coding. But this basically allows you to do that itself, right? Kotlin is super useful for avoiding null point exceptions. Another thing that Kotlin has the ability to do is it has the ability of including all the Java virtual machine libraries. That is the full form of JVM. Pretty much everything which is supported by Java is also supported by Kotlin. So you can do almost anything that Java can do in Kotlin, and that also makes Kotlin a very efficient piece of programming language, right? If you can do pretty much everything that Java can do, but also at a better point of view, it obviously makes Kotlin a better programming language compared to Java, and this is why Kotlin was also chosen as the official language, because it is not only able to do almost everything that Java can do, it can also do it better. So this is why Kotlin is chosen as the official language for coding, right? So we saw the errors that are available in Kotlin, that are avoided by Kotlin as well. And now you might ask me on which all SDEs are these particular languages supported. So Kotlin is supported in IntelliJ IDEA, which is basically another form of a platform to develop your coding skills or your any kind of app. It's also available on Eclipse, which is another kind of IDE, and you can pretty much run it on any command line. And also obviously it's also available on Android Studio. So Kotlin is a very good option when it comes to Android app development, and it's probably the best option when it comes to native Android app development, right? And you can see how easy it is to use Kotlin as well. It's a very easy language. You can see straightforward short form for variable I've written var, and just in the variable name and the data type. And if you don't know any of this, do not worry, do not feel intimidated by it. I will teach you most of the basics when I'm teaching base Java, so you will not be, it won't be too difficult for you, right? Now my absolute favorite option for cross-platform is Flutter, right? Flutter is Google's UI toolkit for building beautiful natively compiled applications, not just for your mobile device, but also for the web and also for desktop from a single code base. So how cool is that? So you're just going to code in one particular code base, and you're going to be able to develop apps for your Android devices, for your iOS devices, for web, and also for your desktop. So that is incredibly cool, and not just cool, it's super efficient. You do not have to waste your time learning 5 to 6 or 3 to 4 languages just to develop individual apps for individual platforms. You can just learn one app. You just have to learn one particular platform language, which is Flutter, and you will be able to develop it for your mobile, you'll be able to develop it for your web, and you'll also be able to develop it for your desktop, which is super cool if you ask me. So Flutter is really new. It's a platform that is again developed by Google, and you can build a iOS app and a Android app using Flutter itself, which makes it super efficient. So the development that you can do in Flutter is very fast, and it's got a very expressive and flexible user interface, and you do get native performance. And what do I mean by native performance? I just mean Android performance. Whatever performance that you get in Android, you can develop it using Flutter as well. And if you have already learned the basics, that is, you've already started coding in Java, you know the native of Java, I think the best option for you would be to learn Flutter after that. So you've finished learning Java and Kotlin, and you're very comfortable with it. You've done a little bit of development as well. Then I think the next milestone as an app developer would be to learn Flutter, so that you can do cross-platform development as well, right? The last point I just wanted to say is that Flutter uses Dart as the programming language. So this is a very important point, that Flutter uses Dart. The reason that I would say that Flutter is very, very, very useful is just because of the cross-platform featureality. From one single code base, you're able to develop apps for multiple operating systems, for multiple devices, for multiple platforms, right? So just imagine how cool that is, right? I'm just coding for Android, but I'm ending up building it for iOS and web and desktop as well. So that's incredibly cool, right? So Flutter is supported on Android Studio, and you can do your Flutter coding on Dart coding on Android Studio as well. And you can also do Flutter on Visual Studio, which is also something which is available as like an SD IDE for your Flutter development. So it's a very good option, and I would say that Flutter is absolutely the next step as an app developer that you should probably take if you want to really move forward and get your skills completely sharpened. Another thing which makes Flutter super, super, super cool is the UI, right? So when you make apps on Flutter, it actually looks really, really good. Let's compare it to a native app which we develop on Java. The apps that we develop on Java, I'm not gonna say that it's not gonna look good, because you can make it look good, but it's a very tedious task to make an app that you develop on Java to look very good. You know, you have to put this particular button, you'll have to put extra XML files, you'll have to put that as a background, and it's just going to be a very tedious task to make anything look really good in Java. But it is possible 100%. But when it comes to Flutter, it is very, very easy, because you know what we do in Flutter is we basically create a particular tree, and then inside that we create further trees and widgets and stuff. So it's just super easy to create a beautiful UI in Flutter, because most of the widgets are basically classes itself. So all of that is pretty much pre-built into the software. So it just makes it that much more easier for me as a developer to create a very good looking app. So another advantage of Flutter that it has over other languages or just other developments is that Flutter has the ability to create beautiful UIs in a lesser amount of time, right? You don't have to spend as much as time as you would spend on Java or Kotlin to make a good looking app. When you come to Flutter, it takes you that much lesser time to make the same app, but even probably in a better UI. So the UI is a super huge boosted in the Flutter option, because Flutter is just going to make the UI look a lot better. It's going to make it more cleaner, it's going to make it more colorful, it's going to make it much more beautiful. And if you just see some tutorials on Flutter apps, or if you've just seen any kind of Flutter app, you will be able to relate with what I'm trying to talk about here. But in overall, Flutter is 100% a super good option that you have, and it's 100% the option that you should go for if you have already done with the basics of app dev. You already know native pretty well, and you can move on to the next stage, right? And yes, Dart is a very new programming language, and it is used for Flutter dev. But another point that I would like to just note is that just because it's a very new language, the support is just developing right now. So you might not be able to find a solution for every error that you encounter while you're developing the app, right? So this is a pretty decent drawback, which makes the other languages like Java and Kotlin a little bit superior. The fact that Flutter might not be able to you might not be able to find a solution for every error or every problem that you face on Flutter, right? So that could be a small problem, but generally you'll still be able to find out most of the problems. And because Google is supporting a lot of its community, and they have a bigger community coming up pretty much every day, Flutter is at the end of the day, it's going to be probably the best option that you have for app dev, right? But Flutter is a really good option that you could take up if you want to do cross-platform app development, or like I said, you want to hit the next milestone as a app developer, right? So the next thing we're going to talk about is React Native. So this is something that web developers really like, and it's just because it's something that is easily understandable to them. React Native basically combines the best part of native development with React, and React is nothing but a best in JavaScript library for building UI, right? So React Native is something which is already React is something which is already available for the web developers. So it is something that is used in order to do React Native as well, and you can make really good looking apps for your Android devices, and not just restricted to Android devices. You can do it for iOS, you can do it for web as well, and you do this by using JavaScript, right? So you're just going to write your code in JavaScript, but it's going to be rendered with native code, right? And another thing that React Native has, another feature that React Native has, is you can see the changes that you make into your particular application as soon as you just save your code. So after writing, let's say 2 or 3 lines, you can just save your code, and as soon as you save your code, you can see the changes right onto your device. So that's pretty cool as well. And the only drawback to React Native, I would say, from a point of an Android app developer, is that it uses JavaScript. So the JavaScript is a different programming language itself. So if I am a Android app developer who's been doing Java and Kotlin, and I want to, let's say, do the cross-platform move, I want to choose a platform where I can do cross-platform development, where I can create for iOS, I can create for Android, and not only these two, I can also create for desktop. uh, Flutter would definitely be the best option compared to React Native for me as an Android app developer, because while Flutter is having Dart, right? And Dart is a programming language which is pretty similar to Java and Kotlin. So you will be able to pick it up pretty easily. It's very similar to Java. So it's not at all different. It's not too different. You will be able to pick it up. It's not going to be too much of a problem. But when it comes to React Native, because it uses JavaScript, which is a different programming language, it could be a little bit intimidating for you initially as an Android app developer, which is the only reason that I personally don't go for React Native, because it uses JavaScript. But if you are a web developer, React Native is definitely the best option you have to create apps, and it creates really good looking apps. Just like I said for Flutter, which is able to create a very good looking app, React Native also has the sameish ability of creating a very good looking app, not just for Android but also for iOS and also for web. But again, like I said, using JavaScript. So if you're a web developer, you already would know the basics of JavaScript very well. So for you, using React Native would be the best option if you want to, let's say, move into the app development side of the field. if you want to move into the Android app dev or any kind of app dev, React would definitely be your go-to option, right? And another option that we have, just to give respect to the iOS users as well, is Swift, right? So if you guys haven't heard of Swift, no problem at all. Swift is pretty popular when it comes to iOS development. It is a programming language by itself, and it is very powerful and intuitive. What it does, it is incorporates the best of C programming language and Objective C programming language for iOS, OS X, tvOS, and watchOS. So these are all types of iOS devices, right? When it comes to OS X, it probably means the MacBooks and stuff like that, and watchOS is basically the smartwatches, and tvOS is probably the Apple TVs that you have. So Swift is something that you are going to use. It's a programming language that you are going to use as an app developer to develop very powerful and very intuitive apps for all of these devices, right? And Swift obviously makes it much easier for you to write software, which is incredibly fast and safe by design. So another feature that Swift has is it's marketed as a very safe programming language, which basically means that it does not have too many bugs, it does not have too many crashes, it does not have too many errors while you're coding the app itself, right? It has apps, like every coding language, there will be errors, there will be bugs, there will be problems, but Swift kind of has the ability to make it much lesser because it has been designed in that kind of a way. Swift is also very fast because it is compared to Objective-C. Swift is definitely much faster, and it is kind of developed in a way to make sure that it is faster than Objective-C, so it's pretty obvious that it is. Also, the performance of Swift is almost the same as that of C++ programming language. So all of you guys have already, most of you guys would have already heard about C++, would have done a lot with C++. So if you know that, you would know that C++ is one of the fastest algorithm calculation arithmetics available for you guys, right? So if Swift is pretty much of that same speed, you could pretty much figure out that Swift is also very good at that particular arithmetic, right? A drawback for Swift would be it has the slower compilation speed. So compilation of your app or compilation of your code would be comparatively slow compared to all the other programming languages. And there is no C++ imports available as well for this particular programming language, right? So we don't really have to go in depth with this programming language because Swift, like I said, it is just for iOS. It's very constrained because, like I said, it can only develop for Apple products, and that is a big constraint on yourself because, like we said earlier, if you just check out the map, the amount of people that are using a iOS device are not too much compared to Android, right? So it wouldn't be the absolute best option for you as a developer to go for only learning Swift because that's gonna really just constrain you up. It's not gonna give you too much of an options to, let's say, work on yourself. You'll just be really constrained to this particular language. But instead, if you learn something like Flutter, which will not only help you to develop apps on iOS and make it look really nice, but it'll also give you the Android base, right? But obviously, like I said, if you're gonna go start doing Android app development, always start with Java. Do not start off with any other coding language because, like I said, Java is the best option that you have as a app developer in today's market, right? So like I said, if you're starting off with the basics, go for Java, and we are also going to be giving you the basics required for you to develop in Java in this particular session. So you don't really have to worry about it. Just follow through, and it's going to be complete basics. I'm just going to teach you a couple of syntaxes about Java, how Java defines its functions, its classes, its for loops, its while loops, the lists, the maps. It's just going to be very basics, and then we will move on to Android Studio, where I'm going to be teaching you guys about just a quick go through about all how everything works and looks in Android Studio, and then I'm just gonna start doing some animations in Android Studio to get you guys started with that as well. So without any further ado, let's go and learn some Java. Okay guys, so This is the platform where we're going to be learning Java today. This is a website called broxy.com, and you can visit this if you want to follow along with me, or you guys can just view it at your free times. But basically, this is a very good platform for us to code in Java, right? So I'm just gonna quickly open up a pre-built example in this particular website, which is going to print hello world for you guys. So package domain is just making sure that all the required packages for this particular program is available, and this is just the public class which is required for Java. You always require a class in Java, and this is just defining that, and this is nothing but the method. So there are some things called as functions, which you guys might already know about. If you guys don't know about it, this is something, this is a way you can define a function. Let's just say I'm just going to call it function1, and I'm just going to define it like this. And obviously I can pass in arguments over here, and I can just define it off like here and just write any code inside. And basically what I can do is any code that I write inside this, any code I write here, any code written here can be called as much as times as you call the function. So let's say I call this particular function whatever code I've written here. If I'm going to call this function in some other class, or even in this, just in this class, or let's just say in the main program, if I'm going to go ahead and call this particular function multiple times, it's going to print that particular code over here. Whatever this code intended to do, it's going to do that how many ever times. So it's going to do that particular piece of code, let's say 3 times in this case, because I've printed it out 3 times. So let's do that. And okay, this is just the basics about functions. So this might look like a function to you, but it's actually a method. So method is nothing but just a chunk of code that does something. You just need to know about that much about a method. It's a chunk of code that does something, and every particular Java program should have a main method or a main function, without which it cannot work, and it should be of a void type. If you're not returning anything, if you're returning something, it will not obviously change, but it should have a main function. This is nothing but just a parameter for this main function, and this is the name of the parameter. Now you can write this as anything. It doesn't have to just be args. You can write it as literally anything. It will still work, but the better option is it to just be defined as whatever it is, because it's just, you know, convention to just write it as args, and it's just a string array, right? So so this program is a basic program. Like I said, it just prints out hello world, nothing too complicated over here. Very basic. So let's take out this particular thing. So yeah, if you guys don't know this, you can just write anything here. Let's say anything can be written here, and it will literally print out whatever you have just written here into your console view. So whatever you're writing inside your Java printout statement will come like this. So in C++, we might have written something like cout, and then we write whatever we want, and then we just put a semicolon, and this used to be able to print out the statement. But instead, in Java, what we do is we write system.out.println, println indicating print line, and then we just write whatever we require inside these double quotes, and then we just put the semicolon. So yes, semicolon is part of the syntax. So like this is a simple syntax change from C++. Now another thing that I wanted to show you guys is the variables and the types that are available in Java. So obviously Java does support a wide variety of variables, as you can see here, and it does support just as much as variables as, let's say, C++ supports, and you can see bytes are supportable, short, int, long, float, double, char, and boolean as well. So all of these are available variables and types. So if you guys do want to just go through all of this website learnjavaonline.org is a good option for you guys to go ahead and learn all the basics about Java in detail. It has an example for each definition, so you can define integers like this in Java, doubles like this, floats like this, characters like this, strings can be defined like this. You can concatenate like this. We'll talk about that in our classes. Booleans can be defined very basically, and we're going to be talking about this as well. So, and you have exercises just to practice. So if you want to get into knowing Java really well, let's say you're trying to be a competitive programmer like I said earlier, then this is probably the best option, a very good website for you to get your basics strong, right? So let us just see how you can define a Boolean in Java. So how do you define a Boolean? So Boolean can either be true or it can be false. So let's say the Boolean is I am a male, right? So let's just say that's the value of the Boolean. So we can just say that it's obviously true, and then we write this, right? So this is how you can define a Boolean in Java. So this is very simple. It's just a simple syntax that I just wanted you guys to know on how you can define a Boolean. Now let's say you want to print this out. Similarly, just write system dot out dot println, and then you just say I want to print I am a male, right? Now can anybody tell me what this particular thing is going to print? What it will print? Will it print I am a male? Will it print yes? Will it print true? What will it print? It will print true. It should print true. Yes, so you can see that it's printing true in the console view. So this is also how you can print out any particular variable. So you can do the same syntax for any variable. So let's say you define an integer, you can do the same thing. So let's say I'm defining an integer and I'm calling it I am a male or whatever. I'm just putting the value as 20, and if I put the same with a system print line, it will still print the same 20 as such. So you can just change the data type over here and the value of it according to the data type that you gave, and you can just play around with this with all the data types that I've given here. You can check it out all with these particular examples. Now let's talk about strings and how you can use strings to your advantage, right? So obviously you define a string like this. Let's say we write it like this. So this format of writing a variable where the first word is kind of in lowercase and the first letter of the second word is kind of in capital is known as camel case, and that is something camel case format of writing a variable, and this is something that you're going to see a lot as a Java developer or just in Android Studios as such. You're going to see this type of definitions a lot, and it's something that you might want to get used to if you haven't gotten used to it. And yeah, let's say my name is Sahil. Okay, so this is the particular string that we have. Obviously this is not correct because we had to put the semicolon. Now if I print this, is obviously going to be wrong because I have not printed the variable that I've taken in, right? So let's write my name is, and then for a string you cannot just write, let's say, comma, and then you can't just write key it's my name, right? This is going to be completely wrong, and it's in fact going to give you an error. Because you cannot write a string like this. You have to be able to concatenate it, and we have to use the plus operator in order to concatenate it. So this is again a very basic way to write a string. So it will say my name is Sahil, and I've written a space here. If you take off that space, it's going to bring it joined together, which obviously doesn't look too nice. So just to fix that up, we just put this, and then we just click on start, and you can see that the name comes out pretty well. My name is Sahil, right? So it's a very basic example on how you can let's just say bring a string and concatenate it using the plus operator, which is pretty much how you this is the only way that you can concatenate strings by using this. So if you want to use multiple one more variable, let's just say we are using int my age as well, and I'm saying my age is 21, right? So we say my name is Sahil, and we just say that we add one more string, that is and my age is and then you give a nice space, and you just go for a plus as well, and then you just go for your age right here. So obviously age does not require you to put any extra requirements. It's just straight away an integer, so it's going to give you 21. So let's just start that off. It's going to say my name is Sahil and my age is 21. Oh, I'm sorry, a semicolon is expected over here in the definition, which could happen most of the time, when you're just coding. It happens a lot of times you just forget the semicolon, and sometimes it happens that just because of this one semicolon you might have spent 6 hours trying to figure out, when it's a long piece of code, just because of this one semicolon you might spend 6 or 7 hours just trying to figure out where the error is, right? So yeah, this doesn't look too good because there's no space, so I'm just going to give it one more space, and now it should look much more neat and clean, and it just looks good, right? So after you get the concepts correct, then it's just all about making your code as efficient as you can. Once you just get your code done and dusted, right? So let's delete all of this and let's go into a little bit more of the arithmetic operations that you can do. So let's say I define a double value a as like 3.4. So doubles are basically like a larger value than float, where it can store more amount of memory than a float. And also what you can store values that are fractions, right? So you cannot store anything in a float or a double which is a uh, integer part. That is, like, you can't store 3 in a double. If you're going to do this, it's going to say it's an error, because you cannot store a it doesn't show it's an error, but you can't use it anywhere, because, well, 3, either it should be written as 3.0 when you're doing the coding, or it should be written as a fractional part, right? But all the time you should make sure that a double always has a fractional part. Also a float has the same thing, it should always have a fractional part, because right now it doesn't show an error, but when I'm doing the coding it will probably show the error if you haven't defined it properly. So just take an example of a double a, and let's just take a similarly, which is going to take a double b, and let's take it as let's say 5.2, any random value. And what we want to do is we want to just multiply these two numbers, right? So again, system dot out dot println, and then we're just going to quickly just multiply these two numbers. So do anybody knows how to do this? It's super simple. You just have to write a star b. It's just going to multiply these two numbers, and it's going to give me the value as an output. So let's just check this out. Yeah, so the multiplied values is going to come, and it's rounded off also to the closest integer. So obviously this isn't too much of a big number to round off, but it generally doesn't round off. If I put a huge number, I don't think it will round it off. It will give me the whole number itself, right? So that is the thing with doubles as well. So we talked about a little bit of arithmetic operations. You can literally do anything with these two numbers. You can add, you can subtract, you can do anything. So just go crazy with all these stuff when you're practicing. Don't hold back. Practice absolutely all the stuff that you get, and just make sure that you're completely clear with the concepts. Okay, so another thing that I wanted to show you guys was the string length option that you have with Java. So let's say I have a string, and again, it's my name itself. So let's say my name, and I want to know what is the length of this particular string. Something that you can use is the dot length operator. So we can just write my string, and I am just going to write dot length. So this particular operator right here for a string, this particular function, it's not just an operator, it's a dot operator, but it's a function of length, which is kind of a part of the Java library. It will allow you to find out the length. So my length of my name is obviously 5, so it should give me 5, or semicolon again. Mistakes happens all the time. So you can see that it gives me the length of my string, that is my name, is 5. So using the length, you can also find out the length of any particular string that you have defined. So this is just something which is very easy, very basic, but I just wanted you guys to know about it, right? So this is something that you can do. Another thing that I would want you guys to do is let's say I want you guys to find the lengths of two strings and then just print that out as a statement. So very simple. I want you guys to try it by yourself as well. I'm gonna give you about 15 seconds to just try it out by yourself. Okay, so obviously this is a very simple concept, and I'm pretty sure most of you would have got it. But if you guys haven't, I just want to print the lengths of both of these particular strings that I'm going to define. So it can be any value. So obviously my answer doesn't have to match. I've taken my name here. You would have taken your length, your name. So I want to do is I want to print this guy's length and this guy's length. So what do? I just put a plus, and then I just write let's say my string 2, and then I just write my string 2 dot the length function. So what's It's going to give, so say obviously this particular string has 5 as well. I'm sorry, this has six particular is this length of that, so it's going to give me a error. And do you know why we have this particular error? This is pretty interesting. It's because I am trying to print a addition of two characters, which isn't really possible until it's an integer value. So what you can do to fix this is you just take this particular thing, this control exit, and you initialize it with an integer. So let's say I put an integer length, right, and then we just write it this way. So this is going to be a much more easier option. And if I just write length over here and I just start this off, so let me call it again. Oh yes, the small error over here. Start. Yes, you can see that it works absolutely fine. You will get 6 plus 5, and this works. So this is a way that you can do this particular operation of just writing a length and just doing the entire operation by itself, right? Now once you've done this, let's talk about a array when it comes to Java. So how do you define a array in Java, right? So let me just delete all of this. Okay, so it's very easy to define a array. I'm just going to define an integer array of prime numbers. Again, camel case, getting used to that. And you just put curly brackets, and whatever you want in the array, you just comma separate it and you can put it inside. So let's say I want prime numbers 2, 3, 5, 7, 11 and 13 and so on, right? So these are all the prime numbers, a couple of the prime numbers, and this is basically an array in itself. So if I want any particular element of this array, I can just write prime number. So let's say I want it starts obviously indexing from 0. So if I have to get, let's say, the third value, or if I want to get the value 3, what do you write? You write prime numbers 1 and you just click on start. So what is this going to give you? It's going to give you back a value. Oh my god, semicolon again. Yeah, this is going to give you back a value of 3, because why? While you just selected 1, but if I choose 2, what is it going to give you? It's not going to give you 3. Don't be confused. In computer programming, always it starts indexing from 0, so it's going to give you 5 and so on. So it's very easy to define an array in a Java, and this is the syntax that you can use to define a array in Java, right? So if you also want to find out the length of this array, how do you do that? So it's very simple in this case as well. You just write the name of the array and then you just write the length function. But in this case, you don't really call it as a function, because this is the syntax you use for finding out the length of an array. And if you just use it like this, it's going to give you the length. So in this case, the length is 6. It's going to start from 0 and it's going to go up till 5, I guess. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the length is obviously 6, and that is exactly what is printed out in this case as well. So just make sure that when you're trying to find out the length of an array, you don't use length function, because that's going to give you an error, as we're going to just see this as well. It's going to give you an error because that is not the variable that is used. It is just this way. I'm sorry, again, bracket is missing. This is how you do it. So you have to just make sure that you know this, right? And if you, another thing that I want to just make sure that you get a hang of is importing the required things. So when it comes to Java, there is so much of utilities available for Java as a library. So you have to be able to import the required libraries for you to be able to code, right? So in this case, it's not much of a problem. But let's say you're going to more advanced stuff like lists and maps and stuff. In that case, you definitely probably need all the libraries, and just to make sure, you can just do this particular import called java.util.star, and then you can just semicolon it off. So this is not going to cause you any error. Instead, it's just going to bring in every particular utility that is required, or pretty much all the stuff that you require for this particular not just for this code, but for a lot more advanced codes as well. It will just bring in everything that is particularly required for solving most of your problems. So if you do find an error where it says, you have to import this particular thing, it's probably that you haven't added this statement. So you can just do that. Now let's talk about a list. So a list is kind of like an array, but it's it has a lot of a different syntaxes, and well, using it on Android, it's used to display items in like a list. It's as simple as that. If you go to a shopping cart as well, in any kind of an app, you would see a list of items, right? So all of that is again kind of like a part of a list itself. So it's talking about creating a list, right? It's super simple how to create a list. The syntax, you just have to follow the syntax. You have to write list, you have to write the name of the list. It can be anything. I'm just going to write a list over here, and we write new array list. So this particular list is a type of array list, so it can store it'll be in an array format, right? And what we're going to do here is we simply just going to add items into the list. So earlier in the array we had just written in everything in curly brackets, and it had come into the array. But in this case you have to individually add each element. So you can just, in this particular list, you can just put list.add, which is the function that you use to add anything into the array, into the list, array list, right? And you can just add anything in such a format, right? So let's say we want 3 elements, right? So I want to add the number 2, the number 3, and the number 4 into this particular array list, and I just want you to print out this list, but also I want you to print out, let's say, the particular element of this list. So now you might ask me which element. Pretty simple answer. This is again going to start indexing from 0. So let's say I want to print out 3. So which one do I put? I put get 1. If you want to print out 3, you put get 1. So this will bring you an output of 3. If you want to print out 4, you put get 2, and this is going to bring you an output of 4. Right, so you get that done as well. And then the next thing that you need to know with lists is how you can remove something from a particular list, right? So let's say I want to remove, so as of now, just see that list.get2, which is basically 4, is being printed out. But if I just remove that thing, then what will be the indexing 2? There will be nothing in index 2. Let's take index 1 before we move on, so it will be more clear. Okay, so this is list.get1, and you can see that the output is 3. But what if I just remove whatever is in the first index, or whatever is in the first index? Yes, so 3 is in the first index. So if I'm removing whatever is in that first index, now what is going to be in the first index is going to be 4. So this is basically the 0th index. After 3 gets removed, this is going to be the 0th index, and this is going to be the first index. So therefore the output of this should be 4 instead of 3. So I'm just removing whatever is in this list using this particular syntax. So this is something again you can use to remove in a list, and add and remove can all be done in this way. So how do you display the list, right? So if you just write a list in such a way in Java, it's not going to be able to display it, right? So I'm just going to remove this as well. So right now the list is 2, 3, 4, but it's not going to be able to print it out just like this, right? You might have to do a little bit of conversion. If it does, it's perfect. It shows like an array form. It shows with the bracket. But if you kind of want to avoid that, you can just do this. Still shows it with the bracket. So okay, in this case you can just say that Java doesn't have that problem, but sometimes in Android Studio, when you're working with a list, you might be needed to take it in a two-string format in order to be able to print it. In this case it's working for both, maybe because I've taken all the utilities, but generally in Android Studio, a lot of the times some particular value of the list, or just the entire list itself, if you want to take it in, you might need to use a string, because this is actually system.out. It's not a log, it's not a toast, which we'll talk about when we get to Android Studio. But in this case it's just a system.out, so it can pretty much print anything. So that's why the list worked just by itself as well. But you can also this is not a required thing, you can take it off, but in Android Studio you might require it. That's why I have mentioned it here. Anyways, that's just something that you might need to know, or you might just find a bit interesting. Yeah, so guys, so another thing that you could just do for the maps is, let's get the maps started. How you define your maps is, you can just define maps, and you can just write map, and so this is basically how you define your map, right? And this is the map itself. So this is how you define a map, and this is your map, right? So this is the name of the map. You can put it as anything actually, but I'm just writing map here. You have to initialize it as a new hash map, again in camel case. And now if you want to put anything into a map, you can only use this particular function. You can't use the add function as we did in the list. You cannot do that. You have to use a put function, right? So let's just say his name is James, and basically this says is that this is the index of James. So whenever I use this particular thing as, like, let's say a key, it's going to give me the value James. So basically map is nothing but what we call as a dictionary in Python. It basically just takes this key and it'll give you this value. It doesn't give you the value father. It never gives you that. It only gives you whatever is in the second part of the map. So let's just print this out. System.out.print line, and then we just say I want you to get something from the map using this particular key. And what is the key? It's going to be father. And let's just finish off these statements, semicolon that, and this should work. It should give me James as the output. So if I change this, it's going to give me, if I give it as Rick, it's going to give me the same, but it's going to give me Rick as the output, because I just changed the value, I didn't change the key. But if I change the key, then it is not going to give me an output. Instead, it'll probably give me an error or a null value, yeah. And I can just change the map get, and it'll give me a fathers. For this key, again, it'll give me this value. So this basically is like the index in a map. You don't really call it a key because that's part of a dictionary in Python, but this kind of works as a key. To be very frank, it just works as a basic key, and you can use it as such. So let's do one more addition of a map, so that we just show you how a map looks as well. So let's just say mother, right? And let's take this part off, and we just say Christy or something like that, Christy, right? So now if I'm just gonna call the entire map rather than just getting a particular value, if I take the particular value, yeah, the particular value will come, but I'm gonna call the entire map, right? So let us do that. Again, like I said, get used to the toString just to make sure that you don't make errors when you come to Android Studio. So just pressing start, it should give me how this particular map looks. So this is how a map looks, so you can just visualize it while coding as well. So for this particular mother key, you get Christy, and for this particular father key, you're gonna get the value Rick. So this is all about maps, and all the basics about maps. If you have one more thing about maps, it would be how to remove something from a map, and you use the same as you did in a list. You're going to use a remove function, and you just have to pass in the key. So just passing in the key, like I said, just acts as the index here. So I'm going to stop saying key, I'm going to say index more often, so you get the concept. So you just pass in the index of that particular value, and in this case the index could also be a string, and it's going to remove it. So you can see now in the particular map there is no mother Christy, there is only father Rick, because, well, mother has been removed, that particular key has been removed, right? So that's how you use maps. So that was pretty much the basics with all the maps and all that. Now let's just quickly go through all the if statements and else statements. So it's very easy. I'm pretty sure you guys already know how if statements and all work. You don't really have to worry about that. But I'm just gonna take a very simple example. I'm just gonna take, like, my age is 18, and I'm just gonna say that if my age is less than 18, okay, let's just take this as 16, right? So, and I'm saying if my age is not greater than 18, that I'm less than 18 years old, then let's say I'm going to print a statement that I'm not allowed to drive or something like that. So no driving or something like that. A very basic if statement. And obviously the else to this if is going to be another statement that you can either just pass in straight away, or you can just write. If you have a certain condition that you want to place, that if it's greater than 18, you can just put in anything, but otherwise you can just write this same condition. But if you want to pass in a extra statement, let's say else if let's say age is greater than or equal to 18, you don't really have to pass this. Sometimes it depends on the logic, but I'm just going to show it so that you guys know. You can drive, right? Can drive. So this should not be much of a problem, because right now what is it going to print? It's obviously going to print no driving because my age is 16, right? So let's just see that working in action. it says no driving. But if I say my age is 21, right, so obviously I am over 18 years old, so I can drive, and it just shows that. So that's a basic if and else statement. Just to refresh your memory, if you guys haven't learned it before, there you go, you just have learned if and else statement and the basics about Java. Now we have the option to learn about arrays. You can do the same thing with arrays as well. You can use a array to basically just in the if statements as well, and you can literally do a lot with if statements. It's super important, and you can it's very very highly used in Android development. So if you know this really well, really good, you don't have to worry too much. You'll be very good at it. So yeah. Now let's go to the loops. So I'm just going to teach you the general syntax of the while and the for loop, which are most often used in developments. And I personally and most of the people use while loops because it's just better than for loops when it comes to Android development. So let's say I defined a variable x, okay, as 1, and I'm saying that as long as x is less than or equal to 10, I want to run a print statement, that is system.out.println, right, and then I am going to print whatever is the value of x, right. So in this case, will this work? It will work, but in a while statement you have to also increment the value. Generally, if you want to, that again depends on your question, but if you want to keep this loop running, you should increment it so that at one point the value of x becomes false for this condition, it becomes greater than 10, and then you can get out of this loop. So generally you want to increment it unless you want to be in an infinite loop, which I don't know why somebody would want to do. So let's just hover past that. Okay, so it looks pretty much correct. Let's just click on start. Let's click on yes. So you can see it prints all the values from 1 to 10. If I remove this equal to statement, it will just print from 1 to 9. Well, because it doesn't equal to 10. But yeah, this is how you can define a while loop in Java. Very similar to C++. And that's why I said, you know, Java is very similar to C++. And for a person who has already learned C++ or any coding language, while it's just going to be, Java is just going to be super simple for you. Now let's say I want to print a for loop as well. So this is how you can define a for loop in Java. Let's say for int y is equal to 1, y is less than or equal to, let's say, 5, and we just say y plus plus, right? So this is basically me just defining a for loop in Java, and you can put in extra factors for the for loop. Let's say I want to print whatever is the value of y, and you can just print it out right here. And that will now show me a little bit more values. It will show me a couple more. You can see right here, it shows me up till 9, and then it just shows me 1 2 3 4 5 as well, because I put less than or equal to 5. And yeah, and that's how you can just get away with most of the code in terms of for loop. So this is a for loop in Java, and you can see how it works. It's pretty much the same syntax of a for loop in C++ as well. So this is how you can do most of your loops in Java. Now the last, not just the last, but pretty much one of the final topics that we're getting to is how you can define a class in Java. So you can just define a class very simply. Let's say it's a class user. So this is how you can define it. We write int, let's say score, and we just finish that off. And let's say this is the score variable is inside this class. And now how can I create, this is, like I said, we've already learned how to create a class before. Right now I don't have to define it publicly, it's inside this class. It's a nested class, as you'd like to call it. Now I want to, let's say I want to simply just make a object for this particular class, right? I just want to make an object for this class. So how do I do that? So you can make an object by just calling the class's name, writing the name of the object, and just following the syntax. Just write new and then the class's name as a function, which is like a constructor as well, and then you can just access the particular variable inside this class using this. So this is kind of the syntax you can follow for a class definition. You can see this will be the object which is going to be able to access this particular variable, or anything inside a class can only be accessed by an object of the class, which is how programming works. You can only access anything in a class using the object of that particular class. And this, as you can see right here, I have defined the objects for this particular class, and this is the syntax. So that's a little bit important when it comes to know how to define the syntax for a particular class. And yeah, you can print out the score. Just write print, just have to write system dot out dot print ln, and you can just write bob dot score. So basically you have to take the entire thing and you have to make sure that you print out the entire statement as well. And you can see the output comes out as to be 10, right? So there is no problem there, and score is all completely properly initialized, and it is working absolutely fine. So this is a way that you can define your classes in an object for the classes. So you can't access this or in any other way rather than defining an object for a class. And yeah, this is how you can use that. So now, since you guys already know quite a bit of the basics of the Java, let's move on to Android Studio, where the real fun begins for most of you guys. And let's just start coding in Android Studio, and I'll just get you introduced to Android Studio as a whole. Okay guys, so this is how Android Studio looks when you just open it up for the first time. So I've created nothing here. This is a very basic empty activity. Now if you aren't really able to reach here in your first attempt, all you need to do is just start a new project and just choose an empty activity. So this is just how an empty activity looks. There is actually a hello world over here. There would be, I've just deleted that off, but yeah, well, this is how an empty activity looks, and we're going to do some animations over here, you know, using some images and stuff. That's going to be a lot of fun, right? So well, let's get to it. But before we get to it, I want you to be very familiar with this front end part of the portion. This is where you're going to design most of your apps. You're going to put in buttons, you're going to put in images, you're going to put in text views. Text views is nothing but, you know, as the name says, you can add text into it. This is the button, this is an image inputter. You can just put images in this. All the other stuff are a little bit advanced, you don't need to know about all that. And you have a plenty of options for how you want to put the text. You want to put in a text for an email ID, or just a password, or just a plain text, or address, or, you know, time or date or whatever. All those options are available. Again, you want to put a different type of widgets, which include, you know, a progress bar, a seek bar, a rating bar. You know, if you're having a Swiggy kind of an app, you would want a rating bar. A Google requires, you know, it gives you add view, map view, layouts, different types of layouts. Layouts is nothing but which covers this entire screen. So in this case, generally standard wise, it comes with a constraint layout, and a constraint layout is basically nothing but you have to put these margins for each thing that you put into your layout. So this is your layout, the entire thing is your layout, and you have to put a margin for everything that comes into your layout. So for example, we are going to be working with animations here. So let's put an image in first. So I've already saved an image. Okay, yeah, before that, let's learn how to bring an image into Android Studio before we do the animation. So for this, you just have to click on your drawable, and what I do is a nice little trick over here. You can just right click on show in Explorer. So it's going to open it up on your Explorer available for your PC. Then what you want to do is you just want to open up your drawable version 24. So just open that up, and once you're here, what you want to do is in the drawable version 24, you want to paste in any picture that you wanted to bring in. So let's say I wanted to bring in from my desktop, I wanted to bring in these two pictures, one of Apple and one of Google, right? So I'm just gonna copy paste both of these pictures into that particular point. So let's just go back, and I'm just gonna paste it in. So you can see these two pictures have now entered into this particular drawable version 24. Make sure you put it in 24 and not the other one. There are two drawable folders, put it in the drawable version 24 so that it definitely works. And yeah, this is all you need to do to bring an image into your Android Studio. Now it's going to start showing up over here as a V24 as soon as you imported it in. And now once you click on image view, let's just, I bring it down here, that particular image is available here as well. So I choose Apple as the first image, right? It's very huge. So obviously I'm gonna tone it down a bit, so you can just like you do in your PPTs and stuff, you can just tone your image down by just you know, dragging it down. So I'm just gonna drag it a bit down again. Okay, that's better. And the next image that you're gonna put is Google PNG. So you don't drag and drop from here, you bring in an image view, and then you choose the image that you want to put in. So I choose Google right here. So let's make that small. Let's bring it a bit up. Okay. So I'm just gonna put it kind of the same size, so you know the animation feels kind of nice, as much as we can. Okay. Okay. Mhm. So this might look a bit weird to you, but once we start the animations, it won't be much of a problem. Okay, so let us see what we can do. So the first thing it shows that it has an error over here, or like a warning over here. So warning is basically just saying that you haven't put a constraint. If you've used a constraint layout, you have to put a constraint. Like I said, anything that goes into this layout needs to be marginalized. It should have margins up vertically and horizontally. So I'm going to put a margin for the first image. I'm going to put a vertical margin and a horizontal margin. So each image needs to have at least one horizontal and at least one vertical margin. So that's a absolute fundamental base, that each image that you put should have at least one horizontal and one vertical margin, and you can put the margins according to however your app looks, however you want your symbol to, however you want your icon to look, or however you want your image, or whatever you're constraining you want it to look, or where you want it to be. You can put whichever left or right constraint, but each there should at least be one horizontal and there should be at least one vertical constraint, which is the only point you have to know. Right. So once you get these constraints done, the next thing you have to do is you have to define these images in your code. So now your images are there in your activity. That's absolutely fine, but you have to define it in your code. But before we define it, I'm just going to take the image which is behind, which is the Apple image. So I'm just going to call it a Apple underscore image, right? And when it comes to image view 4, I'm just going to call it Google underscore image. So this makes it easier for me to identify which is what, and I won't be too confused. So this is the Apple image, this is the Google image, right? Okay, perfect. Now let's get to the main activity, right? When I come to the main activity, you're going to be defining something which is called a view function, public void, let's call it fade. So this can be any name, and I'm going to write view. So now what this is going to do is this is just going to create a simple function which will work as soon as you click on any of these images. So what I want to do is I want to create a transition. That is, when I click the Apple image, initially it's going to show the Apple image, and when I click the Apple image, it's going to fade out and it's going to show me the Google image, and that is what I want to bring in as a basic animation. So when I want to click it, I need to create a function that will be called when it is clicked. So in order to have a function that is going to be called when it's clicked, I'm going to be writing this particular fade function over here, and for any function that has to be clicked, it has to have this particular as its argument. So arguments is something that goes into a function. It's brackets. I've told you this when I think when we're talking about Java functions and stuff. So this is basically how you define a function argument for being clicked, right? And I'm also going to set the Apple image a on click method. So you just have to search, or you can just find it out manually, because you can, it's always available right here. But I'm just going to make sure that you guys know, just click and just look for this on click method over here, right? And you can select it to be clickable, yeah, and just choose this on click method, and I'm just going to choose the fade function. It will automatically come if you have defined the function already properly. And you can see now that the fade function has been highlighted. This fade was actually not blue in color, it was kind of a darkish gray like this, because it hasn't been used yet. But as soon as you start using it, it's going to start lighting up, indicating that it has been used. So the fade function has been used, right? So how do I use the fade function? Now how do I use it for this particular image view, right? So now what's going to happen, as soon as I click on Apple, the image of Apple, this function is going to be invoked, or whatever is inside in this function is going to be invoked. So over here is where we are going to define whatever images we have made in this layout, right? So how do you define this? We call a image view, because what we just added was an image view. You can write anything. I'm going to say Apple image view. Sorry, spelling mistakes. Apple image view, and you can just equal to it. And now you are going to write find view by ID, and you're going to write R, which basically indicates to get all the resources, and you're going to find out the image using the ID variable, because we had set the ID earlier as Apple image over here. So we're going to use the ID variable to find out from the resources, R indicating resources, and then what is the ID of the Apple image. Just write Apple underscore image and just put a semicolon right here. So that is very simple, and you got the image view. Same thing goes for the Google image view. So I'm just going to write Google image view, right? And again, gonna write equal to find view by ID, r dot id dot apple image, sorry, Google image, right? So yeah, that's perfect. Now there's a important thing called as typecasting. So what you're basically doing here is you're defining an image view as this particular find view by ID. So you're finding a view by its ID. So one thing you have to make sure is that this type matches this type. So for that we use typecasting. So just to make sure, you don't have to do this a lot all the time. It's not necessary to come all the time, but yes, it does. It's a very good habit to get into, so that you never run into any kind of error typecasting, so that you make sure that you are making sure that this image view is being initialized to an image view and not just some any other view, because there are plenty of views. You're just making sure that this image view is initialized to an image view by using this typecasting method here. It is a habit that you might want to get into, but it is mostly avoided when you, let's say, go into big apps. You don't have to do it all the time. Okay, now in order to, let's say, fade out the apple image, now whatever is there, the apple image is stored in this particular variable called apple image view, and the Google image is stored in this particular variable called Google image view, right? So whatever you want to do on the apple image view, you do it right here. So let's say I want to fade out the apple image view. So first I call that particular variable image apple image view, and I want to animate it, right? So you just call the animate function, which is again inbuilt. And then what is the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put alpha. So alpha is nothing but the transparency of this particular image. So if alpha can either be 0 or it can range to 0 to 1, right? So if it's 1, the entire image will show. It will be absolutely clear. If it's 0, that means the entire image will fade out, right? Or it will be completely 0, right? So if you just put 0, it's going to go straight up to 0. So instead of just doing that, I'm also going to put a time frame so that it looks like it's fading. I'm going to put 2000. So you don't think that is 2000 seconds. It is always in ms, which is milliseconds. So because 1 second is 1000 milliseconds, this basically just indicates 2 seconds, right? So it's going to take 2 seconds to fade out. And the Google image view that I had created, again, same thing, you just have to create an animate, but I said I want to make this fade in. So into fade in, you just put alpha and you just put 1, because that just indicates the maximum color, and you just set the duration as 2000, right? Okay, now let's see if this works or not. It might or might not work. It's a there might be something that you might need to do a little bit more, and that is to set the initial transparency of this guy as 0. So how you can do that is just take Google image, right? You can just search for the alpha value over here, right? So you just have to put the initial alpha value as, let's say, 0. So with this, what happens is that Google image is going to be not visible to you guys initially, but once I click on the fade function, it's going to set it as 1, and it's going to do it in 2 seconds, and then the Apple image is going to kind of fade out, right? So let us try this out on our Android device that we have ready. So I'm just going to be using a screen sharing software that I have just downloaded. So let me just get that up and running. Okay, so this is how the app looks after the initial run, and what we planned was this should fade out when I click on the Apple button, and a Google should come. So let's see that, and you can see that it did happen. Google faded in and Apple faded out. So this is exactly what we intended to do with the animation, so this worked absolutely fine. Now let's go back to Android Studio. Okay, now so we're back in Android Studio, and now the next thing we need to do is take this to, let's say, another level, right? So right now this is working absolutely fine. There's no problem with it, but now there's just one problem. After I click on the Apple button, you saw that the Google image came, but what if I want to make sure that that happens again and again? That is, if I click on the Google image, once it comes, I want it to go back to the Apple, and once I click on the Apple, I want it to come back to the Google, and I want it to happen again and again and again as much as I click, because as of now it's just going to happen one time. So if you want to make this happen multiple times, let's see how that is also possible. So this is where we're going to use the concept of the if and else statements that we had learned about earlier. So let's just create a boolean also. So boolean, I'm just going to create a global. This is how you create a global variable. Just right over here, anything that is above this is going to be global right over here as well. Anything above all these functions will be global to that particular function. Global in the sense it can be accessed anywhere, right? That's the meaning of a global thing. So let's just say global Apple is showing, like I said, camel case most of the time, and you just say that this is true, right? So I'm just going to say this is true. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we are going to say that inside this itself, these are all correct, but we're just going to take out this particular piece of code because I don't want to animate it initially. What I want to say is once you defined all the images, and I'm saying that if the apple is showing, right, this basically says if apple is showing, what I want you to do is make sure that it says that now apple, once it starts showing, it's going to say okay, right now it's already shown, so now make sure that it is not showing, so that is, and now apple is not showing, that it is false, and you're just going to paste in the apple image, that is now the apple is going to animate to 0, and because it's not showing, and Google image is going to go to 1, right? Now in the other case, the else case of this particular statement, what's going to happen is obviously apple is not going to be showing, right? So if apple is not showing already, that indicates that now apple is going to be shown, right? So if it was not already showing, it's going to be shown right now, and that is how you can write apple is now showing, because initially it's always showing, right? And once if it's always showing and we click on the button, it says okay, now apple should not show, that is it's false, and it takes it out of the, it alphas it out, it puts it to 0, and Google comes in perfect. But if alpha is showing, sorry, if apple is not showing, initially it was not showing, that means Google is showing. If apple is not showing, which is showing? Google is showing. So in that case, I want you to make sure that apple is shown, and this is just a boolean. This does not indicate that it's going to bring back the image. You have to bring back the image using these two things, but now we're going to put alpha to 0 and Google to alpha to 1 and Google to Google's alpha to 0, because now Google has to be faded out and this has to be faded in. So with this, I should be able to produce a loop in which I can click infinite times on each image, and it will vary between the Google and the Apple features. So let us just test this out on our app as well. So you can just click on apply changes and restart your activity, and I'm just going to take you to the device. Okay, so guys, we are in the app right now, and we're going to try and see if on clicking the Apple button it goes to a Google, and if I click on the Google it comes back to the Apple, and I can just do this how many ever times I want. So if I'm clicking on the Apple, fades out to the Google, you can see nice cool animation. And if I click on the Google, it fades out back to the Apple, and I can just do this how many ever times as I please. It's a very basic animation again, but it does the job, right? And this is how you can do this particular alternating animations just using booleans. So we just, and an if and else statement, so we used a lot of stuff that we learned in the initial Java class that I had just taken in this particular session. Now let's go back to Android Studio and let's get to the next animation. Okay guys, so we're going to learn about 3 more animations, and then we're going to start winding up. Now let's take off all of these if statements right now. We don't really need it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to try and move an image in the Y direction. That is, let's say it's moving in Android Studio is done by translation. It's also called as translation. We will see it once we start coding it, but we're going to try and move an image in the Y direction in the sense downwards. So let us try that. So Apple image, right? So I just want to move the Apple image. I'm going to animate it, and I want it to translate Y. Now you can just type translate Y, but I want to translate it by a certain value. I want to translate by 1,000 float, and that's just a value you can put in, and it's going to set a particular duration. And if you don't know how much to put in right here, you can just put in, let's say just put in 1,000 for standard, and then you can just change it according to how it looks in the app, and put the duration in ms. About 2 seconds is what I'm putting, and this is this should move the Apple image in the y-axis on the translation Y by 1,000 units in 2 seconds. So let us see that in the app itself. Okay, so guys, we are right here. So we made the code that if I click on this particular Apple logo, it is going to move translation Y by 1,000 units. If I click on it, you can see it moved by 1,000 units. Now if I want to get it out of the screen, obviously that means I have to move it more than 1,000 units. So if I just click on it again, it just moves out by another 1,000 units, and I can keep doing that as many as times as I would want, but it's just basically gonna move this particular logo 1,000 times off the screen, right? So let's go back to Android Studio and let's check out the next animation. Okay guys, so great work. So we already also saw how that particular image moved in the Y translation, and it looked pretty decent. It's just a basic animation just to be able to just move a image, just so that you guys know that you can move an image as well. Now the next thing is very useful. It's rotation, right? So if you want to rotate an image by, let's say, 1,000 value, and right now what I want to do is I'm going to rotate an image, and I'm going to rotate it, and I'm going to make sure that it fades out with its rotation as well. So I'm just going to rotate it, and I'm going to fade it out to alpha 0, and at a certain time period of, let's say, 2 seconds. So I'm just going to take 2 seconds, and I'm going to fade out this particular image, right? So this code is what I am doing. You can see right here I've done the dot animate. I'm rotating it by 1,000 values, and I'm setting alpha to 0, basically making it completely invisible, and I've taken 2 seconds of time to do that, or 2000 milliseconds, right? So let's start this off and see this in the device. Okay, so guys, we've come into the device, and let's see if it's able to do that particular animation. When I click on the Apple logo, you can see it rotates by 1,000 units, and it turns out to be invisible because, well, we did the fade action, so therefore it has gone. So that was a very basic and simple animation. And let us go back to Android Studio, and let's kind of get to the last animations of this particular session. Okay guys, so we're going to do the final animation so that we just get an idea of all the concepts, and just how animations work in general. And so for this animation, what we're going to do is we're going to bring in this Apple logo from the left side, and we're going to bring it in to the center of the screen by rotating, and it's just going to come and sit in the center of the screen. So that's all we're going to do. We're going to bring in the Apple logo from the left side of the screen to the center of the screen by just rotating it. So it's going to include translation, and it's also going to include rotation as well. So let us see how we can do that. So right now we don't really need this particular function, so I'm just going to delete it off, right? And what we're going to do is, since we're going to do this as soon as the app opens, all this code is going to come inside the onCreate. Like I said earlier, whatever you want to happen as soon as the app opens, or as soon as the app is created, you want to put it inside the onCreate method. So in this case, I'm just going to write image view dot image view, and I'm going to define the Apple image again, because, well, I have to. If I'm writing it here, I have to define it again. And I'm just going to do the typecasting quickly, and let's just do the find view and take from the resources according to the ID, take the Apple image, right? Okay, perfect. Now what we're going to do is we are going to make this image go outside the screen. So then initially I want it to be outside the screen, so that when the app opens up, it rolls or rotates into the screen, right? So for doing that, we have to take the Apple image. We have to take the Apple image, right? We have to set the X value for it, that is just on the left or the right, because X basically takes out the axis horizontally, and Y takes up the vertical axis. So X, I'm going to set it to a -1000, indicating it's going to go left out of the screen, right? Perfect. And I'm going to take the same Apple image, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it into the screen, right? So I'm going to do an animation, animate, I'm going to translate it by an X, and how much. So I'm going to bring it back into the screen, so I'm going to bring it back by 1,000, and then I am going to rotate it by 360 degrees for 10 rotations. So that is 3600, that is 360 into 10. And finally I'm going to set the time frame for this 2 seconds for the rotation completely, and a semicolon to finish it up. So with this piece of code, I will be able to bring in this Apple image from the left side of the screen, which is pretty much all the way up here. There is a couple of constraints that I have to remove, because, well, I'm not using it, then I have to make sure I have to remove it. Okay, I've removed it. Okay, now it's working fine. If I'm not using a function, you should not be keeping it here. So I just removed that name. All you need to know, this Apple logo is going to come from the left side of the screen as soon as I open the app, and it's going to rotate, and it's going to come and sit in the center of the screen, which is basically the idea of this entire line of code, these 2 lines of code. Okay, so let us see this in action. So as you guys can see, that animation worked absolutely perfectly as we intended it to work, and you could see that the logo rotated by 360 for 10 turns and it came right to the center. So this is the last animation that we wanted to learn about. Let's get back to Android Studio and I'll just talk about ending the session. Okay guys, so that's it for today's lesson, today's session, and I hope you guys were able to grasp most of the information that I had given. So I'm just going to do a quick recap on what all you guys would have learned. You guys have learned about basics of Java, the different types of options that you have when you're trying to get into application development, the different types of languages available, the different types of platforms that you have. You learned about the variable definitions, the syntaxes of Java, the basic syntaxes of Java, how you can define maps, how you can define arrays, how you can define lists. And then we also learned about how Android Studio will basically looks as in a front end, how you can add an image, what is a constraint layout, and also most importantly you learned how to do animations in Android Studio, basic animations like rotation, translation and stuff like that, fading in, fading out. And with that, I come to an end to this particular session, and I hope you guys were able to, like I said, understand as much as you guys could from the session. And the code for this entire session, the entire activity will be available in GitHub, and the link will be available in the description below. So I thank you guys for joining this session, and thank you.